was actually adopted when I was very little. I was 2 years old, I think 2.5 years old, with my twin sister, Alexa, from a small town in the, hopefully I'll say this right, Mukachevsky region to the west. And, growing up, I grew up in New York City, actually. I was adopted and moved to New York City from my parents. And, I really kind of, my mindset ultimately was always very much American to an extent. I grew up going to schools in New York City, and I was very fortunate in that way that I got a great education, but I didn't really know, or we didn't really talk much about adoption growing up. It was, a lot of people ask me, my parents, they call me my adopted parents, but to me, they are my parents regardless, right? And a lot of people that are adopted will relate similarly to that. But ultimately, my parents passed away when I was very young. My father passed away when I was 11 years old. My mother passed away when I was 13. And so my sister and I were left to our Aunt Sandy, who was my father's sister, and it was a very public story in New York and I guess in the country and other places as well. And so we kind of grew up, dealing with a lot of that kind of drama and things that happen in the States. But luckily, I was able to get away from that and really just have a normal upbringing in high school, which was really great. And then from there, at 18, I moved out to Los Angeles to start a film company that to pretty much create content that was socially conscious type films. I mean, I really cared about giving back. I felt that I was so fortunate for what my parents were able to give me in the States, that I wanted to do something to give back in many ways. So I started this company, and from there started making films that were socially conscious type films. And we ended up making some great films, and we continue to do so. And I feel very fortunate that I'm able to come back to Ukraine to make a documentary, actually, which you mentioned, about my sister and I going back to Ukraine to find our birth parents. And so we essentially went back to Ukraine. I guess it was in 2012. I think I was about I guess I was 20 years old, and it was an incredible journey. I mean, I can't even, words don't describe the experience that we had. I felt a connection for sure. There was definitely, I looked at people and I said, oh, that could be my brother, that could be my sister, because I didn't know. And but I definitely felt a strong connection to Ukraine. When you're adopted, you sometimes feel like, when you don't know who your birth mother is, there's a disconnect of understanding, how you became a person, if that makes any sense. So for me, that was definitely something that was important to me. And I think, coming to Ukraine and getting to go through that process of figuring out my past and where I came from was super important, and realizing, how beautiful this country is and the people and everything. And, I learned a lot about myself for sure, and it definitely has built my identity in terms of how I want to grow and be, in the future. So I came in 2012, and then strangely enough, I met my wife now, Anastasia Volkov, I believe we have mutual friends, but I believe it was in the Hamptons, and I always say it was kind of game over from then on. Moving forward, I fell in love, and just realized and I didn't know she was Ukrainian. It just happened that way. And then I met Stacy's dad, Alexander Volkov, and for me, losing a father at an early age, it was very important for me to find somebody who I could look up to. And obviously, he's done so much for this country as well. It was an incredible, to learn from him about all the good work he was doing and everything. And so when I came back to Ukraine with them, actually, it was a very incredible experience to see it through their eyes compared to what to the documentary process. So when I first came here, I felt the energy of the people. There was a lot of positive energy, a lot of really, people were on the streets. I felt there was a lot more promoting the country. It felt like there was a lot more support of, supporting everything they love, and going through the streets, I remember that vividly, and just a lot more warmth. There was just a lot more vivid colors, if that makes any sense to me. But coming back, obviously, I'm a positive thinker, so I always like to think, positively in many ways. But I definitely have noticed that, there's definitely a different energy. There's definitely in the city a little bit more, I would say, anxiety in terms of, things. But it's a very tough time, obviously, for everybody. And I'm trying to really learn as much as possible what's going on here, because there's a totally different mentality in every country that America and many countries, and the situation here is very complex, and everybody has their point of views, and all I can do is listen and learn, and I think find ways to help the people, and I think that's kind of to me what's really important, and just I think learning. I mean, my father was a big supporter of learning, and I think I'd like to continue that legacy as well for the people in Ukraine if I can. To me, education is, I think, the starting place of so many things. I learned a lot from Alexander, sports. I mean, sports is an incredible way for kids, to really have structure and find balance in their lives, and it takes them off doing the negative things, and as most kids do when they're growing up, and gives them discipline. And I think, to me, there's a lot of strength in that, in learning sports. And so I think I learned a lot about that from Sasha, and the education element. I think there's a way to blend both those worlds together. So I think I'm definitely learning a lot about how do I help from an education perspective, because education, you start from there, you only grow. That's what, honestly, not just Ukraine, but everybody's lacking, and even in America, the education is we're having issues. It's kind of all over the place, and I think it's just really important to invest in that. Also, good teachers. Teachers are the most important thing, and the older generation has to be good role models for the youth, and I think that's, to me, is also important. Not having a father or mother growing up, I've had to learn a lot of things myself, and luckily I have my twin sister, but at the same time, having leadership, having people that you look up to that give you the input that you need is really important. And I think, being an adopted person, there's a lot of kids out there that probably don't have that. And so, for me as well, that would be something that I would love to get involved with, is, those mentoring programs, as well as, like, how do you give these kids the tools they need to really, become the best they can be, I think a lot of things that helped me get through all the things that happened in America was probably, I kind of joke, but I kind of don't say this in some ways, where I have the Ukrainian blood, I have the strong, backbone. But I think it's also primarily my Aunt Sandy, who was my father's sister. She, a very religious person, and she kind of instilled a lot of forgiveness. I think forgiveness is super important for no matter what happens in your life. You have to try to forgive people and find ways to move forward and be constructive. And I think that's been kind of my cure in many ways, is how do you forgive and move forward? Because you can't just sit there and think all negatively. You have to find constructive ways to be a better person. So that's been kind of my mentality, turning a negative into a positive. I'm actually on the board of a organization called the Donaldson Adoption Institute. Actually, I just stepped off the board just recently, but I was on the board for about 5 or 6 years, where essentially we build all the information, the statistics of adopted children all over the world. And we kind of get to see a lot of that information, where children or kids, teenagers around the ages of 15, obviously it's pretty common sense too, but a lot of the younger kids obviously get adopted, but the older you get, the tougher it gets. And so when you're 15, 16, 17, obviously you're at the point where you probably most likely have a very thin chance of getting adopted. So what do you do when you go off into the world? And that's a really tough question. I mean, it's sad in some ways, but also I'm hopeful that there are certain people there that are giving them the tools and opportunities to have a job or to learn. Again, it comes back to the education. Like if within those orphanages there is some elements of education or mentorship, that those are helpful tools for them to, because there's so many people that need to get adopted, and so many kids that need to get adopted, and I feel so blessed that I was given even the short time that I was adopted for, the opportunity to be in America and to learn and be able to give back now. I think if you're asking me, these kids that are 17, 18 that are going off and doing something, the biggest inspiration that I can give to them is that, although they haven't had parents, they haven't had people to give them the guidance that most kids take for granted, they really have to start believing themselves and understand that they can, again, you can do anything if you think positively. You might be in many tough situations. We're all in different situations, obviously, but I strongly believe that there's a way for you to do something good with your life if you really, stick with it. And I'm a believer also of balance. I mean, we could all do something. We could all work 130%, to our capabilities and be very successful. But what is success? I mean, obviously I'm very fortunate, but at the same time, success to me is really a balance between your family and good people, good friends, and obviously money is important, obviously, as well. But you really have to think about what really matters in this world.